We're looking at some Dynasty Fantasy Football trades. We're looking at some players, how the market is valuing them, how the market will or potentially value them over the next 6 months or longer, so we can try to find those buying opportunities or selling opportunities in our Dynasty leagues. But before we dig in, you need to click that subscribe button right now because we're covering player values every day. We're looking at this rookie draft class every day so you can win those rookie drafts. We're looking at the Senior Bowl heavy right now. We're going to have clips all day long, all week long on those trending players. Click that button. Stop missing out. We're talking about our first player today that people are looking to trade for or sell on the market. Whatever you want to do. I'm not here to sell a player for or against you. It's whatever you want to do, but we're looking at the market. It's Blake Corum. Blake Corum, someone mentioned him in the comment section of a video yesterday. That is why he's here, and I looked him up. He was valued as RB23 in middle of September and dropped to around RB42 range and has popped back up to RB37. And it looks like he's going to stay around there until we know more about this rookie draft class. And looking at the Senior Bowl, he might get usurped by a few more running backs from this rookie class, and he might go down a couple more spots. But honestly, for Dynasty Fantasy Football trade value, it shouldn't really matter that much. The big story here is Kyren Williams, and Kyren Williams has been trucking the workload. He has been getting all the snaps. He has been getting all the touches. They do not let him see the field. He's been seeing way too many touches, and that might shorten his career. It may not, but he's been seeing a lot of touches and a lot of work. We can definitely say that. And the other running backs on the roster are not seeing the light of day. They drafted Blake Corum in the 3rd round. Didn't get much work this year. However, we're going into year 2. Anything can happen. And he's a lot cheaper right now. We can definitely say that. I'd rather have him at RB37 than RB23. Keep trade cut values, and how to look at that is not for the rankings, because if you look at any rankings, they're going to be wrong. About 60% of the rankings that you have is going to be off. About 60% of it. That being said, when you're looking at this, you're looking at what the market is thinking about. Now, of course, the market's going to be down a little bit. He barely touched the ball in 2024 as a rookie. And Kyren Williams, it doesn't look like he's ever going to be off the field, and it looks like they're probably going to sign him forever. So that being said, of course the market's going to be down. The chart makes sense. Now, if you're looking for a straight up him being RB37 next year, that's where you're going to be wrong, and that's where you're really ignorant when you're thinking that way. But when you're looking at this, he scored 2.4 points per game. His best game was what? 4.2 fantasy points, 4.3. And we were not fantasy relevant whatsoever, but we're a talented running back, workhorse running back, who's good at all phases, has some comparisons when it comes to nuance, being good at all phases like Kyren Williams is. Definitely see him as a good fit for the Rams, but if something happens, you're going to want him, and he's more valuable to people who have Kyren Williams on their team. Just to have that backup. If I have him on my team, I'm not going to be too liquid with him. When I look at him with trade value, I don't see him being moved at cost. I think you need a little sweetener with that. I don't think he's going to be actually moved at cost here when you're looking at what's being valued on ADP, what the rankings are. I just don't see that. I see a little bit of diamond fisting because of him being a backup, being a premier backup running back behind Kyren Williams, and running backs are probably more likely to go down in 2025 because we had that run of weeks between Halloween and Thanksgiving where running backs were not getting banged up and coming out. So we should see that be more to the average next year. So we could see some of these backups step up to some better opportunities when it matters in fantasy football. Snap share, all the numbers. You can't really look at that because we weren't touching the ball enough. 58 rushing attempts, 207 yards, 3.6 yards per carry. Kyren Williams, during points this season, his yards per carry were low, but he was getting a lot of work and a lot of touchdowns. 14 touchdowns on the season, 4.1 yards per carry. After everything was said and done, we're looking at Blake Corum. He is a guy to stash, and he's an expensive stash due to Kyren Williams. But if Kyren Williams goes down, his value, trade value, on-field value, potential production is going to skyrocket. And you're looking at like him versus Jalen Coker, him versus Jake Ferguson. Jalen Wright's starting to catch up to him. That's how far he's starting to fall in value. Rashad White's hitting a big low streak in value right now. Rico Dowdle's not too far away from him. That's where he's at value-wise. You're not going to be able to trade those guys for him because whoever drafted him is probably going to hold on to him very tight. But that's going to give you some ideas to be creative and what to do. You're probably going to have to add more. You probably have to be more creative. Like, they're not going to give Blake Corum away. So you're going to have to look at what that team needs, what that manager likes over the years, and just think through the process. But he's a stash play. That's what he is. He's a stash running back right now. He's a premier stash, if you want to look at him that way. A good handcuff running back. Something happens to Kyren Williams. You know you got a talented running back here that's probably going to hold it down. That's probably going to give you some production and maybe even more going forward. That's what you get now, Blake Corum. Now we're looking at Christian Watson. Christian Watson. The market's down on him, and he had some lovers during the start of his career. Things are starting to get quiet. 2022. We were an upside dandy, and we're still an upside dandy. We can still get you those spike weeks. The injuries have been killing his fantasy prowess because you can't count on him week to week. You do not know what's going to happen. And some games he just comes back in. Some games he's out for a bit. You don't know. Target-wise, it's starting to decrease. We got a lot of competition for targets in the Packers passing offense. Now we're down to wide receiver 60 range. So when you think about wide receiver 60 range, it's also like where he's ranked on your wide receiver depth chart. Like, are you looking to start him every week? Then that may not be your best bet. Are you in a best ball league? Because this type of wide receiver who gets deep targets downfield, who can splash here and there, might be okay for you, and you understand that, but it's really depending on the core you got with that wide receiver. When you look at a Christian Watson here, long term, it's not looking too great because we're going to infuse more wide receivers. When you look at the recruiting classes, what we got at college, we got good wide receivers in the pipeline. Not the greatest 2025 wide receiver class, but we'll get a few surprise options that come across the season like, whoa, I didn't know that was going to happen, because we talk about this every day. Young wide receivers throughout high school are more nuanced than what they were like 5, 6, 7 years ago when it comes to route running. Christian Watson here is a wide receiver here that is very volatile. Very volatile. Like nothing to everything type of volatile. And that might be something you do not want. But a target share of 13% and an 8 out of 17.8. That says volatility. We almost hit 1,000 air yards this year. We do not have a 1,000-yard wide receiver on the Packers. That is what we're seeing, and a 13% target share. That just says, hey, this guy's getting deep balls downfield, and that's about it. He's running on 55.5% of the routes. He's getting a little bit of opportunity, less than 20 routes ran per game. Just not enough consistent workload per volume, per game, to keep him consistent in fantasy football. You got Dubs, Reed, Wicks, and company there. Melton, and they'll probably draft more wide receivers to keep talent there. He's going to be a frustrating wide receiver at the price. Knowing this going in that he's a volatile wide receiver with spike weeks that will hit a few times every year. High-end wide receiver 2. He was almost a wide receiver 1 that 1 week. That is something that you could have on the back end of your roster that you can use in a pinch. Or it might be something you want to stay away from. It's really dependent on what you need. But at cost, for a volatile wide receiver like that, that's pretty cheap at wide receiver 60 range. There are other players in his range, in his rankings, that I like better. Like, I'd rather have the long-term upside and explore A.D. Mitchell for the long term. Calvin Ridley's a spike week monster too. He's just like Christian Watson when it comes to fantasy scoring. Go check those charts. Maybe we'll talk about him next week. Let me know if you want me to, and we'll cover those numbers as well. But he's a spike week dandy. And 2 different teams the last 2 years. Dontavian Wicks, same team. Demario Douglas, short target guy, can get you okay production, but not top-tier production, of course. No pop-off weeks. And Wan'Dale Robinson, a target guy, might be a good money ball option there at wide receiver 6'2". I might have to throw him on a video. Looks like we got another year with the Packers. So another year where we can be a volatile play. After that, I don't see a hot market for him on the NFL. So we got to go to the right team, right situation. Long-term wise for Dynasty, not looking great. Like I said, he's a cheap option, a cheap play if you're looking for something volatile for the back end of your bench. That's about it. I don't look for him to go off and be a top-tier wide receiver 2 or anything like that. And I don't see that happening out of him. I look for him to continue to be a volatile wide receiver with some boom weeks. We might catch better boom weeks this year in 2025. That could happen. Really just depends on how deep the target is that he reels in and splashes on. Honestly, and a couple of those balls, if they were a little bit deeper this year that he brought in, then that could have happened. That being said, Christian Watson, we know what he is. He's a spike week dandy. He's a guy that can give you a few good weeks out of the year, and the rest are downers, and you just got to tread those waters. But at the price tag, that's really what you're looking at in that range. There's other wide receivers when it comes to long term, when it comes to stability, but not top-tier production that you might be looking at, and it's really depending on what you want at that part of your roster. Chris Olave, his value has dropped from wide receiver 10 to wide receiver 25, and I do not look for him to be that low on the actual Dynasty trade markets. So I'm looking at this chart here, and it's telling me he's dropping in value, which should make sense because he was barely on the field. So all that makes sense to me. And now when I look at that and I think about the average of all the leagues I'm in, I don't see him being too liquid. I see him being maybe a shade cheaper. I see him being a player that I have to still be creative with. But I might be able to get more deals done. But I feel like market sentiment, I feel like Dynasty gamers are just not thinking about him in the same light as a year and a half ago, and that's fine. But Chris Olave is still a talented wide receiver. In drafts, redrafts, startup drafts, you're going to get him a little bit cheaper depending on where you're trying to buy in at. He's going to be a little bit cheaper in ADP. It's all saying, hey, the market sentiment's a little bit low on this player because we've been out with a concussion. We have one wide receiver 1 week, which is more than a lot of wide receivers and 2 wide receiver 2 weeks. So we got some productivity. We're going to get some deep shots downfield, even though the average depth of target was lower this year. As you look at this, an 8 out of 10.3, but a target share pushing 20%, and that's with some games where he was in and out as well. So over 20% target share, that's what we're seeing here. 44 targets on the season in limited action, 455 air yards. So we would have pushed for over 1,000 air yards easy this season. And we're running over 20 routes per game, and would have been more too. That average would have been higher if we didn't leave games. That being said, Chris Olave getting deep targets downfield, 7 of them on the season. So we would have pushed like 15 to 20. So volume-wise, it's looking good. He leads this team in receiving still, even though he's missing a ton of games. That should tell you enough. Target share is good, air yards good, and we're getting good volume. Look for him to ramp things back up next year. Look for him to get good workload. Take the discount if it comes. Kick the tires and see if you can get a discount on him. Look for what could happen with that. Talk to the people in your league. See what can happen. We're with the Saints for a little bit longer. The players around them are very similar, like veteran wide receivers who are dropping in value. If you like any of them in that range, I think Terry McLaurin, he's going to be diamond-fisted a little bit. Xavier Worthy's kind of low considering the recency bias that should be there. But you're looking at guys like Waddle, Metcalf, Moore. If you're looking for a veteran wide receiver and you want to see how cheap you can get them, you can always kick the tires. No one's a buy or sell. It's whether or not their value changes, perception changes among the market, and you just kick the tires and see what happens. Buys and sells aren't real in Dynasty Fantasy Football. Brian Thomas Jr. So why is he here? Because I have to pull it up, but a lot of people, or some people, small pocket of people, but it's still a lot to me, are talking as he's a sell, and that just goes against how I play the game and how I look at players and my evaluation. So how I look at this, if I see a massive change, a big move on a player, down or up, doesn't matter. I look at potential to kick the tires to see what happens if I'm interested in doing so. So when you look at the chart, It definitely says market sentiment has increased from September to January to now. It's definitely said that, and that makes sense. That holds true. And that being said, everyone likes Brian Thomas more than what they did over the summer last year, and he's holding more value. So if he's holding more value, and if you're interested, you can always kick the tires. It's a good opportunity to do so, but you don't have to. He's not an instant sell or a must sell. He's a good wide receiver. He's 22 years old. He's almost quarterback proof. But you have to be very fluid with your prospect evaluations depending on who's listening to you. But if the chart looked opposite and said opposite, I would say the same thing, that it's a kick the tires type of deal if you want to, or you can hold and see things through. But what we do know is that this guy was productive, 16.7 points per game, but more important is that he had 6 wide receiver 1 weeks, 4 wide receiver 2 weeks. His down games were pretty decent. He only had like 3 true bust weeks. 5 points, 6 points, 3 points, and 9.8er if you want to throw that in. Depends on what you want to do there. So honestly, a very stable wide receiver with up and down quarterback play. Was able to hold true as a rookie. And we got good volume downfield. We got a good 8 out of 11.6. He's a 4-3 guy, so he's also getting shorter targets as well because you can use them everywhere. 1,500 air yards. A good target share of 25.5%. He's getting an elite work rate. He's getting treated like an elite wide receiver. Target accuracy ranks 47th among wide receivers. And with the amount of production he was able to pull off this year, with that target accuracy, he's doing damn good. He's doing damn good. People are saying that he's a sell because the chart did this. When a chart does this or a chart does that, that honestly only tells you to kick the tires if you want to. That's the only thing. I think if you want to hold him, I think you're looking at a strong profile here. First round pick that came out and blew up. I think you got a strong wide receiver. And strong means you're also strong on the market. That's what that means. Strong in your lineup, strong on your bench, strong in the market, strong everywhere. That's what that is saying here. Adjacent players, Puka Nacua, CeeDee Lamb, Malik Neighbors. People were saying the same thing about Puka Nacua last year at this time. People said that about Amon-Ra when he first blew up. They'll say that about every wide receiver after they blow up, or any player after they blow up. But it's just to kick the tires moment. Just look at it as that and just watch the charts. And if it's saying, hey, this player's on the up massively, then maybe if I want to, if I have a weird feeling or anything else, or maybe I want to see. Maybe you catch a Godfather offer. Maybe you do. That's the other option here. Maybe you catch a Godfather offer. And that does not mean they're a sell. That just means that something came to you too good to be true. And that's really to your perspective. It's something you can't say no to. Like, you don't come to the comment section and ask. So you just hit that button, you roll, and you smile. That's it. You can't ask. You just run to your phone to hit that button so hard. That's what that means. If that comes your way, and there's potential for that when a player shoots up like that, that's the one thing you want to look at. Maybe you want to kick the tires for a Godfather offer. Really depends on how your team's built. But Brian Thomas Jr. is looking very strong. Christian Kirk, his teammate, opposite. Wide receiver 68. The market's taking a dump on him. We did have some productivity this year. A couple wide receiver 2 weeks. The year prior, we were okay. We were steady. He's pretty much a steady slot receiver that can be used on the outside a little bit. Average 6.6 targets per game over the last 2 seasons. We can be productive. They're not going to be productive on the high end. I think a lot of people were hoping for that. When you're looking at how he was used on the field, we got 47 targets, almost a 20% target share. So that's very good to look at. Yards per route ran, 1.81. Route participation rate, we're out there on almost 80% of the routes. So there's some good things in his prospect profile. The ADOT was higher this year at 13.7. He was getting deeper targets downfield. So that being said, you're getting a target share pushing 20% when he was healthy with a good ADOT in double digits. That's something to look at. And at wide receiver 70 range, that's a deal. That's a deal. We know he's here for your dynasty team for a good time and not a long time, so you just got to play the part with that. With him playing 8 games, he's still third among wide receivers on the team when it comes to yardage, if that matters to you. But a good target share, a good ADOT, that's something to look at among these wide receivers that are ranked around his range. You're looking at a veteran, if you want a veteran on the cheap that's getting target share and a good ADOT and volume, something to look at. But his contract says not for long. So if you're not interested in not for long, if you're rebuilding, then no. That's why I'm talking out different angles here, because players are in different angles in Dynasty Fantasy Football. It's whatever you want to do. It's also depending on how cheap you can catch him. And I think you can catch him pretty cheap. That market just crashed on him. So this is another kick the tires scenario. You see that, you see what comes back at you. Maybe you catch a Godfather offer in a different light. Maybe you get him for a very cheap pick, maybe during your rookie draft or something. Maybe the rookie well is dried up, 3rd, 4th round or something, and someone's willing to part because they just want to get back in. It's not saying it's value. It's saying that happens in drafts. That's real life. That happens in drafts. You never know. Here it says early 3rd. I don't know. I'd rather hold on to my early 3rd because of how deep this running back class is. I don't see trades being that fluid with it. But when you're in draft, well's dried up, you don't like what's going on, and you need a backup wide receiver to fill the void, 19% target share, ADOT increased this year. Maybe you look at Christian Kirk. Maybe that's the guy you want to look at. Maybe that's an option, and we're just looking at cheap trash can options here to help your team. Another stash play for you, honestly. He's just a stash wide receiver for the next year or so, maybe 3 years at most. You ain't got much longer with Christian Kirk. Not a top-tier wide receiver. Never has, never will be. A lot of people was hoping. But the hopium has popped. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Make sure to hit that subscribe button on the way out. One thing for watching. Catch you on the next video.